Just a few months ago, India had its 2024 Lok Sabha elections. India will again be conducting elections for the legislative assemblies of Jammu and Kashmir, Haryana, Maharashtra, and Jharkhand this year. Next year, in 2025, there will be assembly elections in Delhi and Bihar. Of course, there are several local body elections taking place all across the country in 2024. As with every election, there will be a massive mobilization of manpower and resources to conduct and manage these elections. So, how much does an election cost in India? Back in 2019, expenditure in the Lok Sabha elections touched Rs 60,000 crore. Expenditures during the 2024 Lok Sabha elections are estimated to have cost as much as Rs 1.35 lakh crore. This encompasses all direct and indirect spending related to polls, including that by political parties and organizations, candidates, the government, and the Election Commission. The Election Commission of India spends money on training and deployment of officials and armed personnel, setting up of polling booths, procuring electronic voting machines, and other materials like the indelible ink, awareness programs for voters, and so on. In 2014, the Election Commission spent Rs 3,870 crore on the Lok Sabha elections, and this would have only skyrocketed after 10 years. This cost is ultimately borne by the centre. Similarly, the cost of holding the state assembly elections, which depends on the size and population of the state, is borne by the state government. Instead of spending these vast sums of taxpayers' money on repeated elections, wouldn't it be better to spend it on education, healthcare, infrastructure, defense, etc.? This is where the idea of one nation, one election comes into play. This idea proposes that India hold simultaneous elections for both the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, unifying our election cycle. Let's look at why this reform could be revolutionary for India. We'll explore its advantages, how it could reshape the Indian political landscape, and the data that supports it. But first, let's break down what we mean by one nation, one election. Currently, elections in India happen at different times. We have national elections for the Lok Sabha every 5 years, and elections for state assemblies occur based on when each state's term ends. This leads to frequent elections across the country. Now, the proposal for one nation, one election means conducting all these elections at the same time across the nation once every 5 years. Historically, India did have simultaneous elections from 1952 to 1967, but after the premature dissolution of the Lok Sabha and several state assemblies, elections got staggered. The idea now is to return to that system with both parliamentary and state elections held together at the same time or in the same year. One of the strongest arguments in favor of one nation, one election is the enormous cost savings. As mentioned earlier, Rs 60,000 crore were spent in the 2019 Lok Sabha elections, and around 1.35 lakh crore rupees was spent in the 2024 Lok Sabha polls. Add to that the cost of separate state elections every year, and we are talking about a massive amount of resources being spent just on elections. Holding simultaneous elections could reduce the cost of elections, saving thousands of crores of rupees, money that could instead be used for development programs, infrastructure, healthcare, or education. Just think about it. Instead of spending such vast sums on repeated elections, that money could be channeled to solve pressing issues like poverty, healthcare, or education. Have you ever noticed how during elections it feels like the working of the government slows down? No new projects are announced, no new decisions are made, there is only a status quo. But why is this? That's because during elections, the Model Code of Conduct comes into force. The MCC restricts the government from announcing new policies, starting new projects, or making big decisions in the belief that such actions might influence voters. The MCC can cause governance to grind to a halt for several months, delaying key decisions and development projects. This often leads to a reduction in development work during election periods, adversely affecting the people and the nation. If elections were held simultaneously, we could avoid these frequent disruptions. Both the state and central governments would have a full 5-year term to focus on governance and long-term policy making without being constantly pulled into election mode. This brings us to the next major benefit: political stability. Frequent elections push political parties into a state of constant campaigning. As a result, governments often focus on short-term populist measures rather than long-term policy reforms. Imagine if the government had 5 full years to work without being distracted by elections every few months. Simultaneous elections would give governments the opportunity to focus on long-term development plans free from the pressure of constant electoral politics. And this isn't just about policy either. Having simultaneous elections can also foster a more stable political environment, reducing the chances of unstable coalition governments, which can often slow down decision making. With elections happening almost every year in different states, voters are frequently called to cast their ballots. While voting is an essential democratic process, repeated elections can cause electoral fatigue, leading to lower voter turnout in state elections and less enthusiasm for the political process. Simultaneous elections could help increase voter turnout by making the process of casting the vote more convenient, as voters would be more engaged in a single decisive election cycle every 5 years. This would not only make elections more efficient, but also more representative of the will of the people. Another significant benefit of one nation, one election is the reduced pressure on security forces. Every election, whether it's national or state, requires the deployment of tens of thousands of security personnel to ensure a smooth voting process. Imagine the strain on our forces. Not only are they pulled from their regular duties, but repeated deployments during state elections mean they are frequently called away from securing our borders or maintaining law and order in sensitive areas. With simultaneous elections, we would be able to focus all security resources at once, and security personnel would be freed up for their core duties for the rest of the 5-year period. Another overlooked advantage is that simultaneous elections would lead to better synchronization of state and central policies. Right now, a state government may be halfway through its term while the central government has just started or is about to finish its term. This leads to misalignment in the implementation of national programs such as Swachh Bharat, Ayushman Bharat, or Make in India. Having a synchronized electoral cycle ensures that both the state and central governments are working in tandem, which could result in better execution of policies, especially in areas like infrastructure development, public health, and education reform. While one nation, one election comes with immense benefits, it isn't without its challenges. Questions remain about how to handle situations where a government loses its majority midterm, or how different political climates in states might affect election outcomes. However, these are issues that can be addressed with careful planning and appropriate constitutional amendments. But the potential benefits, cost savings, political stability, improved governance, higher voter turnout, and reduced strain on security forces make this idea worth serious consideration. The Modi government is seeking to implement one nation, one election in its third term, something which has been a key promise in the BJP manifesto. It's time for India to debate, discuss, and embrace this transformative change.